the Great Canadian Talk Show.
And now, let's get right down to business with Marty Gold.
Not much updates on the provincial Conservative nomination process yet. Grant Jackson, who we spoke about previously, Larry Maguire's boy, taken by the hand by Larry Maguire, and he handily won the PC nomination in Spruce Woods. This past week, Shannon Martin decided that he was leaving politics, as he told the Free Press, this CBC, sorry, in a very out of the ordinary kind of story in some respects. Political life, said Shannon Martin, is a lot like a relationship. You're always going to have highs and lows, and sometimes things just don't work out. You need to make that decision on the best thing for me personally and for my family, simply move on to new opportunities. In other words, having failed to win the nomination where he, back in his old bailiwick, Southern Manitoba, that he lost that nomination, he's not even going to try to win the nomination of the seat he does hold, McPhillips, where he was parachuted into the first time when his seat disappeared, and now it's reappeared, his rural seat. He's not even going to give it a try. This means 13 out of 36 Tory MLAs have left Broadway or will be leaving Broadway. The story noting that Shannon Martin never given a cabinet post, even as most other Winnipeg area Tories were. Now I got to think about which Winnipeg area Tories weren't given a cabinet post. He, of course, ran for the Tory leadership, had an aborted, so to speak, or abortive, I guess, leadership run when he couldn't generate the 1,000 memberships required for the entry level into the race. That's where Heather Stephenson took the measure of Shelley Glover. He said now here's a peculiar sentence, Kenny. Martin said he has no regrets about his political career, but did not go into detail. Huh?
What?
Now, if it was he has regrets, wouldn't go into detail. That sentence would make sense.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, said Shannon Martin. I probably rubbed a few people the wrong way, especially the powers that be. I guess he means Pallister over the years. One political analyst, get ready to start sleeping, said it was never clear why Martin holds some of the same progressive views on social issues that Stephenson does, was passed over. I don't know why he was excluded and wasn't designated to play a bigger role, said Paul Thomas. I was interviewing Paul Thomas on MTN TV in 1989, and he was old then. Now, Martin holds some of the same progressive views on social issues. Why he was passed over cabinet, that might explain it right there. How many progressives? You know, Kenny, I've noticed something.
What's that?
You often hear the term in political parties that somebody's a right-wing this and a left-wing that, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Or now in the Conservative Party, that used to be called, in going back to Joe Clark's day, a red Tory. Okay, a leaning to the left Conservative. You know what you never hear? Right-wing New Democrat.
Oh. Yeah.
The New
No, you don't.
The New Democrats shuffled their shadow cabinet in this past week. Wab Kinew, and if you want to have a good laugh, here's your first laugh. Concordia MLA Matt Wiebe, he was the former constituency assistant for Greg. Was he a constituency assistant for Greg? Was he a constituency assistant? Was he for Selinger? Why do I think he was a constituency assistant for Gary Doerr? Anyways, a longtime party hack, became an MLA. He's now the new Justice Critic, taking over from Nahanni Fontaine, who was made Families Critic. Fontaine said, Free Press story, she will be focused on issues of housing, child and family services, and poverty, and will continue as opposition House Leader. Let me tell you a little something about Nahanni Fontaine and child and family services. As she was forced to admit at a town hall she walked out of during the 2016 election that I reported on, I think I might have been the only reporter there, when she walked out, when the going got tough, she admitted that in 5.5 years as special advisor to the anti-white racist Eric Robinson, who was the Minister of Families, that in those 5.5 years, despite the number of families in the North End whose children had been seized under dubious, questionable, and wrong circumstances by child and family service agencies, and the mistreatment and maltreatment those families had received, from the social workers, the unions involved that universally support the NDP, Nahanni Fontaine admitted that in 5.5 years, she never once raised questions with the NDP government about the snatching of First Nations children. And now she's going to be the family services critic for Wab Kinew. That's just reeks of credibility. Meanwhile, Matt Weave's the Justice Critic. Guess who isn't the Justice Critic? An actual lawyer that's in the NDP caucus for Gary MLA Mark Wazaloo, former chair of the Winnipeg School Division, who doesn't get education, doesn't get justice. When it says was shuffled to, he sure got the shuffle all right, from finance critic to economic development, investment and trade, and environment and climate. In other words, Mark Wazaloo, here's your big nothing burger to chew on. That's the bench strength of the NDP under Wab Kinew. The Black Rod having put up an analysis. Hey, I don't know if you saw, Kenny, your old friend Dan Lett.
Yeah.
He made the blogosphere again.
Oh, good.
Revealing the Heather Stephenson magic trick that has scared the NDP leading to the October election. This was after an opinion column from the city's king of fake news, Dan Lett, who suddenly realized his hopes and dreams may be swirling down the toilet. Now, about a week before this story ran, this blog was put up around February 21st or 22nd. So in the middle of the month, around Valentine's Day, Paul Thomas wrote a column giving the NDP advice on what it was going to take to beat the New Democrats. And 2 days later, Lett jumps on the same bandwagon. They've got a remarkable 20-point lead in Winnipeg, suggesting the coming election is Wab Kinew's to lose. But by week's end, wrote the Black Rod, in a column dripping with flop sweat, a term so archaic I had to look it up.
Flop sweat?
Flop sweat.
Really? I use that all the time.
You do? Well, Dan Lett put out a column dripping with flop sweat, putting distance between himself and his political hero, and it put a new light on his interview with Wab Kinew, because as he wrote, the Conservatives pledging $123 million of incentives for the healthcare system and to recruit nurses. So Lett put forward the following hypothesis after being ignored and bullied for years. Yeah, like the nurses have been ignored. Will nurses forgive the NDP government, accept the incentives being offered in return? And among the expected cheap shots at the government, Lett fired an arrow to the heart of the NDP's hope. It may be exactly the right plan, but may have come at precisely the wrong time. So it appears that Dan Lett was saying the Conservatives actually came up with the right plan for a change.
But if only it was a different time. There's always something with these Conservatives.
The point... Oh, God. The point was made that Dan Lett went from declaring the NDP was a sure thing to undermining them on health care. And the Black Rod's conclusion was that the Black Rod column about the victory of Kevin Klein in particular, that the NDP is not generating more support in the general among the voters, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they vote in Kirkfield Park actually dropped 20%. And I realize it was a by-election that doesn't necessarily have the same numbers, but they threw out all the stops, and they still fell short against Klein, who, of course, did have some advantages admitted, but all things being considered, Dan Lett asked Wab Kinew, was overconfidence in NDP victory why people didn't show up to vote? Is there a referendum on health care? But the Black Rod said, without health care as an issue, the NDP was essentially a one-trick pony with endless harangues about Aboriginal issues. Were people reluctant to elect a, quote, premier of First Nations heritage, asked Lett. And he wrote, it will not help that the PCs will be hammering hard on Kinew's personal history before he entered politics, and in particular his run-ins with the law. Can you wisely dodge the question?
I think that goes to show you Dan Lett's mindset when he talks about Manitobans worrying about electing our first Native premier. I mean, I don't think that's an issue at all.
You think it's just the dislikability of Wab Kinew, regardless of whether he's First Nations or not?
Yeah. Like it's a personal thing, not who he is, but what he's done.
So the conclusion of the blog piece, the dogs can smell the fear in NDP circles and in the Winnipeg Free Press newsroom. So in other words, based on my personal view of this, what is going on is a not very conservative platform, as Heather Stephenson is like the second coming of Hugh McFadden, and is trying to run to the left of the NDP to cobble together a mandate in the October or earlier election. Because these kinds of spending promises and the priorities of conservative government, they're very much waffling to the left, as they used to say in the old days, rather than waffling to anywhere near the right. But what do we know?
I don't know.
You have tax and spend New Democrats. You have tax and spend conservatives. The one thing you never hear is a right-wing New Democrat. Next time you hear it, please let me know, folks.
Yeah, exactly.
Off to a break, Kenny.
Let's do it.
And then we'll come back and we'll update a couple of our stories, crime courts, public safety updates. Still looking for a sponsor for that. Don't be shy. You can sponsor it for a week, a month, a particular episode. If there's an issue you want addressed, or you want to come on, do an interview with us and address it yourself, get a hold of me, martygoldlive@gmail.com.